It is indeed a pleasure to be part of this panel and presenting the Union budget for 2023. 2022 and 23 have been completely different in terms of the geopolitical scene. If you could see, 2022 we were just coming out of the pandemic. A lot of eagerness, buoyancy for everyone to get back to their vocation. There was demand in the market in all avenues, but the supply chain problem came along with it, clogged the growth. Then if you could see each of the most of the Western economies handled the pandemic by printing currencies and depositing it in the individual citizens' account, and this led to heavy inflation, which is a natural progression of what done. You could see that the European economies suffered from inflation. Later off of 2022, we had the Ukrainian war crisis and the sanctions following it, which created the energy crisis. So a lot of turbulences. India more or less was lucky with through diplomatic channels. At least oil crisis was more or less managed, and inflation also more or less we managed well. Could say the policies of the government was took care of it to a larger extent. So that being so, you could see the markets from the peak of in 2022 during the COVID, and after that it tumbled down. And beginning of 2023, a few days before, you had the Adani FPO issue that also, if you could see, created a ruckus in the market. In this background, we were expecting the union budget to come up and see what was in store. Well, the economic survey, which was presented yesterday, had very modest expectations in terms of growth for the next year, from 7-8%, which was hoped a year back and all. Now it's 6.5% is the growth that has been targeted, which is more realistic, I would say. And today, when the budget was presented, you could see that there was so much of euphoria in the market initially. The ending figures, of course, Nifty was down, and I think Sensex about 158 points up. That's this thing. What is the budget? Overall, there has been investments in all sectors. The idea is to bring back growth, encourage employment, and the benefits India has in the geopolitical scene. How do we capitalize it? That is more or less the government's initiative. You could see the Atmanirbhar plan, which was incentivizing, which is to incentivize global brands to put up shop in India to manufacture, so that production can move from China to India, had been initiated. Now, how do we back it with more investments in infrastructure, healthcare, rural economies, digitizing the rural economies, and all these things, plans have been laid out in this current budget. And the middle class, about 300 million of us, have been for the first time addressed in this budget. For last 2-3 budgets, there was nothing much for the middle class, you could say, but the upper middle class has made benefit from the income tax relief that has been given. So this is the overall scene, and I am joined here today Mr. Ramakrishnan, Harmony Constructions, representing the real estate business. Ramesh Ananthakrishnan from DSM Soft, representing IT services. Dr. Ananthakrishnan from Curie Hospital, urologist and a robotic surgeon, will be presenting on the healthcare. Past President P. Ramakrishnan on the manufacturing sector. He imports largely from the Europe and supplies to the domestic market here. So his perspective on the manufacturing sector. So how, and of course, our Neelakantan, Neelu from CNGSN, tax practitioner, a finance professional, will give us perspective on from the markets and financial perspective. So we'll maybe have 5 minutes from each of them, and then we can leave the floor open for discussion and also some questions, and we'll take it forward. So we will start with Ram.
Yeah, greetings and let's have a nice evening, everybody. So the panel here is an extremely powerful panel that's outside of me. And we will try and see as to what best perspective that we have, we will be able to share with you. As I said early on with somebody while having coffee, the budget itself is just a document of revenue and expenditure. I'm sure, wiser counsel will prevail with the financial experts here. It tells you as to where the money is coming from and where the money is going. It probably roughly indicates as to where the government thinks the money should go. It doesn't truly tell that, because halfway down the road they can always change all that. But what we will talk about, and I'm going to talk only about the SMEs, because I come from manufacturing of the sector which is MSME, which I like to define as companies with turnover 100 crores and below, which employs 86% of all people who are employed in manufacturing. It's 6.5 crores employees by MSME, out of which 50% are in rural areas. So MSME's contribution to the country has been probably less recognized. 30% of GDP comes from, again, the manufacturing sector within the SME segment. The demand from SMEs have probably been, I wouldn't say unrepresented, but probably less represented, because if you join an industry body, for instance, whether it be the big guys like CIA and ASSOCHAM and so on, the intent is always that, let's talk about issues like, where are we going now? We are looking at adding up another 5,000 people. I mean, MSMEs don't add 5,000 people over 3 years. They need 20 years to do that. But they can grow so fast and so organically, they can open up branches like no one else can, that the need for really nurturing MSMEs has probably not been well understood. Everybody, within the department, government and all that, they grapple with data. They have all the data. It's not that they are not informed. But I think the voice is not being properly heard there. So powerful lobbies are not representing the smaller segments. So from that perspective, let's look at some of the issues which I think I can take it, of course, in stages so that, it doesn't really clog your mind in terms of only manufacture. I'll take 1 or 2 points and then I'll come back and probably approach the other aspects. One major area where it's a state subject, though, it is land. Land has been one of the strong felt. So if you sit in one of these meetings at CIA or ASSOCHAM, the SME guy would say that, come on, I mean, we are being pushed out of Guindy, which we all got pushed out of about 10 years ago. We're all getting pushed out of Ambattur, which were 2 specific industrial estates which were meant only for SMEs. Now it's been taken over by the IT guys, just for the reason that they can afford to pay 2.5, 3 times the amount which a manufacturing company can pay. And the reason for that is because the per capita space required in IT sector is 2.1 meters, and in manufacturing it is 8.5. So IT guy can afford to pay 3.5 to 4 times the rate. I mean, it's a simple mathematics which Ramki will probably be able to endorse. So we're all getting pushed out. Now, you can say that, the large companies can go to Sriperumbudur, they can go even further down to Kanchipuram. They can send their people by buses. If you employ only 60 people or 100 people, you won't be able to do that. So the cost of operation for an SME would be under control only if there is an industrial captive estate which is available within the periphery of the city. There has been a long-felt demand, but it's been the least addressed. Nobody cares about it. It's revenue for the corporation if it is an IT company which is taking over industrial area, because it's n number of units are going to come up there, so the property tax and so on and so forth multiplies. So it is to nobody's gain to come up and say that, we need to be very close to the city, which is the demand which has been felt. The other one is, we talk about FTAs. And one of the recent FTAs which has been signed up by India is with Australia. And this has been going on for a long while. Australia doesn't at all wield the political power. For a country which is, the largest country in the world in terms of landmass, but having only 22 million people, and politically actually, it's a kind of a non-comer. Who knows Australia in terms of a political pressure they are able to bring to bear on the world community. But we yielded to the pressure for the reason that, it's also geographically very large, and for China, we need to keep Australia in good humor and so on. We don't have an FDA with Indonesia. And in terms of relative population difference, we are talking of 21 million here and 280 million there. They are 10 times larger in size. And India's export, why FTA becomes important again from an MSC perspective is, India is largely an exporter of, I would say, commodities, which is very people-centric. So more people in a country, it's going to be a great potential for India in terms of signing up FTA. Australia's FTA is going to help Australia for the reason that we are a very large importer of food and food-related products, which Australia is very capable of doing. Now, what would we export to Australia? You can't export, even in terms of IT services, it's 20 million people there. So the question of trying to sign up with countries which have least population and FTA arrangement doesn't really help the larger segment in India. So this has been another thing which we have been saying that, if we can have FTAs with countries with large population, that would help. MSME exports are growing, of course, no doubt about it, but we need those special tariff, which only an FTA will be able to ensure. So that's a long-felt need, which hopefully the government at some point in time will be able to address. So I think I will leave it at this point, and then the others can share their views.
Thank you, Ram. Ramki on real estate.
We've been seeing the real estate scenario for the last 6-7 years. Let's just take it from the era of Modi in 2014. There has not been one good real year where we said, no, everything is fine. No, all things are happening, and so we've always had pretty insipid years where nothing happened and things like that, except for the last year. Till the last year, it has been, only expectations. Is the next year going to be better? Nothing happens. And after COVID, we have seen a phenomenal transformation. At least I can see a lot of momentum on the ground, at least so far as housing is concerned, where I'm directly dealing with things on a day-to-day basis. Huge inventory had been piled up, unsold inventory had been piled up, and there were quite a few major projects which got into all kinds of problems. Big projects which were endorsed by bigger brand ambassadors in key areas like NCR, Mumbai went kaput. And all of this surplus inventory, we are seeing that they are getting absorbed in these last 2 years pretty rapidly, much faster than what we have expected. And newer projects are being announced from the housing side. One major unexpected bonus has been the absorption of commercial real estate as well. When people were thinking that the largest industry, the IT industry, which used to be the major consumer of real estate, commercial real estate, when they opted for work from home and things like that, there were a lot of doomsday profits, but that has not happened, and last year has seen quite a bit of commercial real estate being gobbled up. Large projects, sizes of which unheard of, have also been done. So it's looking very bright, and generally we don't have many expectations on the budget, on the eve of the budget from a real estate perspective. We thought whenever we think of 10 things, 5 or 6 things never get addressed. 2 or 3 things completely unexpected happens, and two, gets addressed partially. So the only silver linings that I see in this particular budget are perhaps the push in infrastructure, which has to happen, that may indirectly contribute to the real estate boom and keep the momentum going. Uh, we can see that the country is getting wired very clearly. Roads, railways, we can see it with our own eyes, airports, ports, even trading by rivers and things like that are being envisaged. So we know that this government never does things directly, indirectly things happen. Um, but fundamentally, we have a very good positive outlook about the real estate scenario, and the infrastructure being the real push. One other small factor would be probably more money in the hands of the consumer with the tax slabs, people being able to afford bigger budgets, fence sitters who would be able to take a decision on buying a house. So that could possibly happen. I think one very crucial element, which I don't know what would be the implication, we need to see that, has been some kind of changes in the way capital gains reduction has been attempted to. In a way, I think there is a cap in the capital gains above a certain value that has come about, and also the way in which it needs to be measured. Certain provisions that have been given that will enable people who even go in for joint development of properties to be able to save quite a bit on capital gains. So this could indirectly also affect the real estate scenario, both from housing as well as commercial perspective. Of course, I think the major schemes that have been announced, housing schemes, the PMAY scheme, I think their budget provides quite a bit of it. I think there's an increase in the outlay of it. Those will really help the disadvantaged to the home people to get a roof over their heads. That's a step in the right directions. These are some of the points that I felt about the budget. Nothing much substantially, but perhaps things could percolate from all sides, making it much better than what actually obviously looks. Thanks.
Thanks, Ramki. In fact, the capital investment outlay has been increased by 33% to 10 lakh crores. I mean, that's the major, which the government hopes will have a multiplier effect. And also the highest ever capital outlay of 2.24 lakh crores for railways has also, this is also a major investment. And also there has been encouragement to the states to increase their capital outlay by the 50-year interest-free loan being given for infrastructure. That again being so all these things with hope is to, government has taken a big stride in capital investment. They also hope the private also does an equal measure, because the sentiments are good. Private also increase the investment together. This will increase employment is the hope the government is intending. On the cap you mentioned, the cap has been is 10 crores now. For any, previously if you sell a land or a house property and buy a house property, the capital gains savings should be there, exemptions would be there. Now that reinvestment is limited to 10 crores. So that cap, they have brought it up. And of course, what I can think of in the MSME, the only thing I could see is that about corpus has been created of 2 lakh crores for the CGTMS scheme, which is bringing in more money to the CGTMS scheme so that MSMEs can take more loans and thereby maybe invest, and again aiding investment by the private small and medium enterprises. So that's the one factor I saw for MSME which will help, other than the generic factors. Yeah. Absolutely. So that brings us to Neelu. You can present your perspective, Neelu.
Good evening. the biggest challenge is for a finance minister is she has to plan like a test match player, but pay to the gallery like a T20. So you have a stock market which is looking for a T20 action, but elections is another T20 now because she's just 12 months away. So she has tried to build a balance sheet. First most challenge is whether she will keep her borrowing under control, because otherwise then again they will compete with the other corporates for borrowing. When the king borrows, the rest cannot get a better rate. So that challenge will always be there. The second is, of course, too difficult to predict what will happen to the dollar, whether the commodity, with China coming back, what will be the commodity prices, whether that will affect corporate earnings. If corporate earnings turn bad, some of the PSUs also may not show profit, so the divestment plan, some 6 lakh odd crores, whether that will happen. So all those are here open challenges. Anyway, we are stuck with the defense outlay, that will go, the interest outlay will go, we have a broader bureaucracy, that will cost money. The 240,000 on the railways, we do look at small MSME listings of all railway companies. Capital is not a constraint in India, that even the finance minister understand. Today, talent is the constraint. Today you want to build a world-class product company, India doesn't have that quality talent. The best IITs, they probably migrate, or they are too unaffordable for the mid-sized corporate. So I think whatever amount of capital is available, today capital is available, either the equity market gives, you have fancy debt markets. She has done a very good turn by the International Finance Center being allowed to do acquisition financing, which will come very handy for Indian corporates, because PSU banks don't finance acquisition finance. HDFC is only happy giving home loans. Same Kotak will charge 21% on stress loans. So there's absolutely no, that is why the Nomuras, the SocGens are making huge money. 21% IRR is made on acquisition financing. If the GIFT City, it really comes, I think we may get best of breed financiers. Indian companies can become we can borrow from GIFT City than any opaque structure in Mauritius. So that is one more thing. Honestly, I do not have an idea whether the spillover effect of 10 lakh crores, 50 airports, numbers seem big, but it takes us 10 years to build a flyover. So 50 airports, it has to be really with the private. I don't think government can actually execute 50 airports, because it requires a lot of commitment. Land acquisition will be a challenge. Last mile connectivity, also smaller airports, traffic may drop and wane. So all those challenges are there for the implementation of this 50 airport and 100 transport hubs. Numbers are huge, but things are happening on the ground, but numbers are huge. As it is, there's a huge shift of some of the big commodity movers are moving to the railways. The shift is happening. Inland container reports are also reporting huge growth. Coal handling, I think, has to change. I think probably there will be a much better, logistic support for coal handling, because as we see, power plants are dying. And that is putting huge pressure on non-conventional energy. Non-conventional energy, though it looks green, it is not actually green. It looks easy to be green. Again, you are consuming raw material. Again, the grid evacuation, the cost of implementing that is very high. It puts huge cost on the end user, because conventional energy is much, much cheaper. Coal is much cheaper. Of course, it hits the environment, but that's what we have to live with. The other great thing is she is trying to put money in the hands of the people by looking at different slab rates, but inflation can actually eat it away. Well, whether that will result in consumption, we do not know, but if somewhere prices adjust on inflation, I think that available luxury will go away. Of course, we were looking for some direction on especially the PMLA and stuff like that. Maybe it's not the forum, but if you had given a direction, I think the confidence of promoters who are thrust with a PMLA notice or a ED notice, all that will should go away, because at the slightest drop of hat, you get a notice, then your banker stops your bank limit. All the mid-sized firms are having that huge challenge. They get one notice and they are paralyzed. So maybe there should be some look onto that, and probably some more tinkering on the IBC, so the resolutions happen faster. We're looking for it. And of course, on the stock markets, I think India is actually very mature. So the way they understand, the way they react to news, so it's all very mature. India raised phenomenal money in this year. India also lost phenomenal money. Stressed valuations, they corrected immediately. Like Paytm, they didn't wait for 5 years to correct. The valuation was good. They liked it, they disliked it, the valuations corrected. And extending the startups has been a good idea. Again, I'm telling you, the startups need high quality manpower. I'm sure, but that is not available. Initially, the promoter starts with a lot of ambition, then suddenly he finds a second rung, cannot scale the product up. Like India should have developed a chat GPT. India didn't. Somebody sitting there, because I'm sure half the techies there are Indians. who are writing it. So I think somewhere we need a sheer leadership. Maybe the upskilling centers can provide that leadership. That's all I got to say. Anything with the question I will answer.
Just add to the point concerning skilling. It's one of the major handicaps. I'm sure Venkat has been talking about it since several years now. When World War II demolished Germany, the only way by which they could build the country back was they said, we are not going to depend on engineers, but we will depend on the technicians. So the ratio of technician to an engineer in Germany is 1:8. Or rather 8:1, 8 technicians to 1 engineer. They said that engineers can actually, draw up a program, they can, nicely do a drawing for you, do all the engineering work. Somebody has to execute. And that execution has to be top quality. It doesn't come from an engineer, it comes from a qualified technician. So they put up technical institutes like mad. One of the reasons why IIT Madras came up with the German partnership was that the Germans have been masters when it comes to technology, not from engineering perspective. That's something which is lacking in India, and it's much more lacking. This is unbelievable. Much more lacking in MSME because it's very people dependent as against large companies which are more automated. Today, you can't even get a qualified welder. I mean, this is unimaginable in a country which thinks that, we can compete with China. We are famously talking about China Plus and so on and so forth. We don't have qualified welders. And that's a lack which is substantial. So anything which we need to talk about in terms of taking us to a 5 trillion economy can start only by skilling.
Thank you, Neelu and Ram. The tax rationalization, if you could see, I did a comparison with the old scheme of taxation and the new scheme. The new scheme doesn't allow for deductions and exemptions. So for 10 lakh income level, there is, the old scheme is much better. For 20 lakh and 30 lakh, as the income grows, the newer scheme actually is in par with the old scheme. So what they are trying to do is push everyone from an the exemption and deductions schema of things to have a scheme where there is no cross subsidization and a neat tax structure. They want you to put, they are pushing into taking up the new scheme. So that's very obvious from that's not come up in the morning, but when they do the back of the envelope calculations, that tomorrow people know that tax exemption they're offering is more sort of a window dressing. But of course, a lot of people in the lower slab will get benefited from it. Right now, we move on to IT services and we can come to healthcare. Ramesh.
Yes, good evening, all of you. I'm Ramesh. My view is there's only so much that a government can do. In my opinion, the government can provide a general, strategic direction, and they should create an enabling environment, and then unleash the entrepreneurial spirits of the common man and the entrepreneurs. I think this is a government which I think has the will to do that, and I think, and also all the statements, especially the focus on the infrastructure sector, I think seems to underline that theme. I mean, maybe if I sort of digress a little bit, I mean, the sense of mission that this government has reminds me of other governments. I mean, in the Asian economies, I mean, who have been sort of way ahead of us. I think that the first name that comes to my mind is Chiang Kai-shek. I mean, he was a person, I think he's probably the only leader in the world who actually sort of like ruled two countries, I think over a 40-year period. First he ruled the mainland China, and then after he was like driven out, he went to like Taiwan. And actually the first country in Asia which achieved economic miracle was like Taiwan. Even though many people seem to think that it's like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore who actually created the economic miracle, it is actually Chiang Kai-shek who actually sort of inspired even Lee Kuan Yew. And Lee Kuan Yew in turn inspired like Deng Xiaoping in China. And I mean, I have read enough to know that like sort of like even though Chiang Kai-shek and Deng Xiaoping were ideological rivals, I think even he saw the value of what Chiang Kai-shek had done in Taiwan. Similarly, I think on a sort of smaller scale, I think this was replicated like in other Asian countries. I mean, when I say Asian, I mean ASEAN countries. I think the impression I get is that we are headed in that like sort of like direction. We are about like 30 years late, or maybe even 40 years late. But this government has that like sort of that sense of, I mean, they are very clean. I don't think they encourage. I mean, even though you do keep hearing rumors every now and then, I don't think there is a sort of like crony capitalism at work on a large scale. There might be some isolated instances. I'm not very sure, but the government has managed to convey to the common man that hard work will pay, and they have managed to create the impression that the government will provide an enabling environment. And then it is up to the individuals. I mean, I know this Ram spoke about, skill challenges and things like that. I believe it is the responsibility of the citizens, be it entrepreneurs, be it educational institutions, to be able to solve that. I think the government has a limited role, So I think from the way I see it, this government has the will to create an enabling infrastructure, create an enabling environment. And also, these things take a long time. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. I think the government is sort of, especially the leadership shows tremendous will, which I think has been absorbed by the people of India. So I think this budget, I think is in the right step, I mean, I think this is in the right direction. And I think we will, I mean, I'm of the view that we will actually sort of grow very strongly. I mean, a couple of other points I want to make is that, this liberalization has been on for some time, even in India, I think for almost like 3 decades. But these kind of animal spirits were really not on view, I think, the sort of the ability to think big and so on. I think even, for example, when they came up with that, this high-speed, train corridor from Ahmedabad, there was so much of noise. But if you want to compete with China, I think people need to think big, and the country needs to think big. It needs to have a very strong sort of leadership and be able to inspire its citizens. So I think this is a government which has that. So I'm generally pretty optimistic. And then just one other point. It's not only about hard infrastructure. I mean, when I mean by, I think everybody understands what is the meaning of hard infrastructure. It could be roads, it could be ports, it could be airports. But this government, as an IT person, and especially in the geospatial domain, this government is giving a lot of, what can I say? They're giving a lot of encouragement for the creation of sort of data infrastructure, which is something which is woefully lacking in India, and all of that will also spur the economy in the years to come. So I think overall, I think this is a government that's going in the right direction.
Thank you, Ramesh. We move on to the Dr. Anand for his inputs on health sector.
Thanks, Gopal. So health is always a contentious issue. But even more contentious is, I think, the president asking a urologist to talk about health. Right? I would probably, he said, doctor, you can bring a unique perspective of Binchunare. I would probably be better off talking about how your flow is there any burning or something like that. Pass-through effect. Huh? But anyway, so the key here is all of us, as Ramesh sir said, we're in the right direction and so on. But what sort of health system are we in? Right? Before we get into that, I'll have a small disclaimer. So I was operating whole of today, so I didn't know what happened in the budget. My good friend and guide, RMN, was kind enough to look at the health aspects of the budget and then brief me on what to, probably say. So thank you, RMN, before I start. Huh? So, yeah, so I'll just give you what I think about what sort of health system are we in, right? Are we a good system? Right? If you want, in your minds, what do you think is a good country to be in? UK, USA is probably what you think of, isn't it? Huh? But what do you think they spend on their health budget? Right? UK spends about 10% of GDP on their health budget. America spends about 18% of their GDP on their health budget. What do you think India spends? 2.5%. So that is the state we're in. And not this government, not this time. Over the last so many years, it's been like that, right? Each and every government has pushed that a bit higher, but not anywhere beyond what it needs to be. So we are all in a very fantastic city. Chennai is the mecca of medicine. So we do not know the reality in the rest of the country. So we are really not in such a great stage. But I think the government's doing what it needs to. Right? We are one of the highest, the most populous country in the world. I think we've crossed China now. Yeah, it's not possible for the government to do everything. But it has been doing something. So, in fact, the healthcare budget of America is more than our entire GDP put together. Right? So, we are a 3 trillion, 3.18 trillion economy. They spend $4.3 billion on their, $1 trillion on their health budget itself. So, I think, exactly, 1/4. In fact, Britain spends much higher than us with 60 million people. We are 1.3 billion people. Yeah. So, so that's a moot point. Because in our circles, in our people, we think we are a bit healthy. But if you just go outside, right? Just outside the city, outside into real India, like I call it, we are not really very healthy people. So the biggest killers nowadays are not, we hear about cancer a lot here in our circles here in cities. But the biggest killers are diabetes, hypertension, and what people eat makes them malnourished right now, right? So that's one of the important things that the government's done. So what they're doing is they're trying to bring in millets as one of the major food sources for the people, instead of rice and wheat and so on. Though millets are slightly more expensive. But again, there's an argument to be made against millets because it doesn't give you a good protein source. But it's a good step in the right direction, right? So preventing health problems, that's I think one of the main steps that the government's taken. The specifics of health is for this budget, they've done a pretty good thing, I would say, in terms of, for instance, we have so many medical colleges in India, but we don't have that many nursing colleges, right? We need the number of nursing colleges to go up. So government's promised to do 157, I think, yeah? 157 nursing colleges, which I think is a phenomenally good step in the right direction. Right? Where do you think they failed, Abdina? So if you divide our population into 40, the lowest 40, the mid 40, and the highest 20, we're not too bothered. They can pay for themselves, they can do everything that they want. The lowest 40 below poverty line can be covered with the Ayushman Bharat schemes. Right? That's a good step. It's a very good step by the government. They're trying to bring everybody with, in fact, I have a thought process about it. It's not equality which we should aim at, it's equity. Right? Not everybody requires the same level of health care. Not everybody requires the same, you can't pigeonhole an entire, like 300 million people into one single thing and say, this is what you need. Rather than do that, I think they should be able to provide universal health insurance, not universal health care. I think that's one of the key steps they should do, but that hasn't happened this time. So if you're in the middle class, like Gopal sir said, the lower middle class, a catastrophic health event would push you below poverty line. Right? You'll have to sell your assets to get things done. I'll just give you a simple example. 3 days ago, RMN's driver had a massive heart attack. Nobody gets a heart attack with money in their pockets, right? Unless you have an insurance card or you're able to pay, you say, I have a credit card, I'm going to pay. Most of the corporates won't be able to take you out, right? And, he had backing, the driver had backing, RMN said, I'll pay for him, and then things happened. So this is called the golden hour treatment. If you do not get the appropriate treatment in the appropriate time, then he would have passed away. Right? So this is what the government needs to do. The middle class, now what they've done is in a couple of things. Number one is somebody gets hurt, accidents. Right? Again, nobody gets injured with money in their pockets. Right? And if they're unconscious, what happens to them? So what they're doing now is they're trying to bring in the system where the first 48 hours, especially in Tamil Nadu, it's been pushed in. First 48 hours of treatment is going to be free in a big group of hospitals. It could be any hospital, they just need to apply and get into the system. And that's being taken over by the union government in this budget as well. So that's a good step again in the right direction. Yeah. It's a good step. So then again, life insurance for you said MSMEs and small businesses. All you have to do is contribute a set amount for that particular scheme, and then this again provides life insurance up to a certain amount. So I won't go into specifics. I think we can answer that in the questions. But generally, has the government increased the budget outlay for health? Sadly, no. Though the absolute allocation has increased, in percentage terms, it hasn't increased. That's not a good sign, right? If we need to get to where UK or US is, we need to go towards that direction. But then again, this is an election year, like you said. So more infra projects, less social projects which have a long-term impact on the people. Oh, please.
I think, I mean, my theme is generally about not expecting from government. For example, like, healthcare. You're saying the percentage GDP is 2% compared to other economies. And even in absolute terms, in percentage terms, everything is low. See, I feel as a private citizen or as a private entrepreneur, we have a role. That is, for example, I mean, I'll give you I can just to give an expression. I will say, you can create the geo effect in health. Nobody stops an individual from creating the geo effect. I mean, now what I mean by geo effect is, the telecom revolution was unleashed by an individual enterprise, in this case the RIL. Now I think, for example, like, I've said this many places, I am inspired by Mr. Mukesh Ambani, who says there are 4 guiding principles that should be followed by any business. The first one is, does it contribute to the good of the society? The healthcare, nobody can deny that. Then the next 2 points, the guiding principles are transformation. Can you provide a transformative effect? I mean, this is also an often used word, like, transformation, but objectively, what does transformation mean? Transformation means being able to offer something cheaper, and I think it is the and condition that is important, and also more efficient. And then the 4th one is, does it generate a profit? So I think, for example, so that unleashed the geo effect in India, and all Airtel and Vodafone and all were left like complaining initially by this, because this actually happened 20 years back in the voice segment also. When RCOM came, again, Mr. Mukesh Ambani was there. So he unleashed that effect, and they knew at least for 5 or 6 years that this effect is going to come again in the data side, because geo was coming back to us. One day they did not spring up. So nobody did not gear them up and things like that. So it was a combination of 2G plus 3G sort of. But whereas when they came with the geo, it was on all IP. It was a 4G network with ability to scale up to 5G, 6G, and 7G, and so on. So the thing is, I feel the onus, I think that's what I like about this government. Like, as I said, what Chiang Kai-shek did, what Lee Kuan Yew did, and also like Deng Xiaoping. I mean, Deng Xiaoping came from the Cultural Revolution, ideologically, moved in the sort of like communism and socialism. But he realized, I think, during the Cultural Revolution, that this is going to go nowhere actually, and that the government, whatever schemes, top down, nothing is going to work. You have to create an enabling infrastructure, and you have to enable people and things like that. In fact, if you see the Chinese experiment, India has at least never been in like social. I mean, we may use the word like socialism, but not in the communist sort of sense. That country itself came through a sort of like a communist revolution, the PRC, the People's Republic of China. So they unleashed a country that was not used to like dynamism or entrepreneurship. Deng Xiaoping saw the value of this. And so on, So I feel, anyway, to cut a long story short, I'm saying, for example, in geo, you can create a geo of health. Maybe, how you transform is, if a CT scan is doing for 10,000 rupees, a geo effect would mean a 2,000 rupee CT scan. And as of the good quality, it means, and so on. And so the affordability increases. I don't believe the government actually can do this. It's only the private sector can do it.
That's a very good point Ramesh has made. It always is public-private partnership, right? So one of the best examples of that is this 108 ambulance that you have here, right? It's again public-private partnership. Anytime you call 108, it happens, right? It's not just the government. Government cannot do it. And to come back to that statement, there's something called OOPE, that is out-of-pocket expenditure, right? So you have the government, you have the insurance companies that can provide you a certain amount of healthcare benefits. But then the out-of-pocket expenditure is what literally pulls down the patients or people into poverty. In Tamil Nadu, it's one of the lowest out-of-pocket expenditure. But if you go to Uttar Pradesh, it's about 5 times higher than what we pay here as out-of-pocket expenditure. So again, different areas. Again, because we are in a fantastic setup here. Tamil Nadu is one of the best healthcare sectors in the country, right? For instance, even this 157 medical colleges is going to help the rest of India because Tamil Nadu and Kerala are the only 2 states that produce surplus nurses, right? Surplus doctors. So again, we are in the best part of the country. So our perspective about what the government is doing here and what the government is doing there is slightly different. But they have to do quite a bit for the rest of the country for them to catch up to even our level here in the southern India, right? So about specifics, I think we'll take it as the questions go. Yeah, go ahead.
Floor open and for any questions. Yeah.
Sure. Let me set the cat among the pigeons. Do we need a budget? Because if you look at it from a perspective, earlier the indirect taxes was a big source of revenue for the government. Now, with the introduction of GST, the suspense around the tax rates is completely gone away. So the question here is, do we need a budget, annual budget, which keeps this everybody guessing as to what is going to happen? Or just maybe somebody said, why not a 5-year budget corresponding to the election, and then say at the end of the 5 years you make, and we're changing laws, whether very small laws in the budget, which has no relevance to the budget itself to a large extent. On healthcare, I have only one point, that one of the major concerns that seems to be losing everybody's eye is the fact that the expected life expectancy at birth is now moved up from 68 to 70, 71 over the last couple of years. But the health adjusted life expectancy has remained static around 53, 54, which means you have a gap of about 17, 18 years of serious problems. Which means your expectations on income is going to go up. But at the same time, I don't believe in this comparison of US and now with 10% GDP allocation and things like that. As a doctor, everybody in US is complaining that you can't get an appointment to the doctor. In India, that's not a problem. Should we chase the corporate style of healthcare administration? When actually, if you look at India, you'll find that some of the best healthcare institutions are not-for-profit ones. So these are questions that we have to look at it and not look for budget to give directions, because I think we need to look at it. We require something dramatically different.
I'll try and answer the healthcare part. This only proves my point that you are staying in one of the best areas and saying I can get an appointment to a doctor anytime I want. All you need to do is go outside. Right? Just travel 100 kilometers out of Chennai, you will be in a You just need to go to southern Andhra. I get people from 500 kilometers away coming to our hospital to get treated. Right? That's the unheard of there in the US. Right? So you may get. So Canada has a universal healthcare system, and they may delay their appointments and so on. So, but even there, they have specific time frames. Right? So they have time frames from the date of diagnosis till the date of initiation of treatment. There's a specific time frame. If that doesn't happen, then there's a big hue and cry about it. Here, there's so much unreported stuff going on. So we don't have a universal reporting system, and that's one of the things that the government is doing now. Right? We don't have a universal healthcare system. The same level of care that happens here in Chennai will never happen outside. Right? So that's what the government needs to implement. That's where the budget needs to be allocated to. Number, we really are in a phenomenally good place. Yeah. So, so many people from there coming to us, the northeast states and so on. So, for instance, even small procedures that take about half an hour or 45 minutes to do in our hospital, people travel 1,000 kilometers to get it done. One is there is a trust deficit in areas outside major cities. The other thing is access to care, accessibility, access. These are things that the government needs to address. I mean, we really are sitting in oasis and then talking about the rest of it.
What predates the Geo model is the Arvind model.
That's one of the best models, actually.
I mean, so that's a private initiative, unaided by the government to a very large extent.
So that's one of my favorite healthcare systems in the world over. That's in fact, I think it is the best system in the world over. So the patient decides how much they pay when they walk out of the operating room or when they see the doctor. The hospital does not charge them any fee at all. So they decide. Right? If you want it to be completely free, it's free. Right? And again, they're still the most profitable entity in healthcare systems wherever, especially in healthcare. How did they manage it? Like Sir said, it's a geo. So what they managed to do is they increase their operational efficiency so much. But that's, I think, primarily because it's single vertical, and they're under somebody who directs them, and as a team they're able to have a common ethos. I think their ethos is, when they started out, they said that Dr. Venkateswamy's idea was to prevent needless blindness. That was the ethos of that hospital. And they were achieved. But then again, that's one system. You look at the number of people they're able to treat, is nothing compared to what India needs. So, and that's been there for 30 years. Why is it not being followed?
See, because I think, that, I think what happens is the societal objective is not embedded in the corporate objective. For example, I mean, I don't want to take names. You take any corporate hospital, they do not have embedded in them a societal objective. They have, they may be transformative, they may be, and so on, and they may want to make a return on investment. Where Arvind model scored, I think, is that we embedded
The point he's making is the interest of the hospital and the interest of the patient is aligned. So if they're not aligned, there will be a huge trust deficit. Yes. And that is there in several other systems.
That is why the corporate hospitals, so many do not able to reach the people and people like that, because they are not driven by that. I'm not a socialist or communist to say that that's not the way, but I'm just saying, but whereas why the geo effect is remarkable is a large corporate is incorporating into its broader objectives are very, very desirable social objectives. That is, which unleash, a driver, a taxman who are on the sort of lower, for example, people will remember 16 rupees per hour minute for incoming call, mobile. First, that was the one he closed in 2002. Now he made like data and voice. Actually, they are not anything different. It's all packets of data. So he made it everything free. I mean, it's not free, but the ARPU or whatever they call it, the average revenue per user was made. So then, when you give that enabling environment, that's what I'm saying, government or an enterprise should give an enabling environment, then it's up to each and every individual to make the best use out of whatever they want. So, that, that's sort of it.
I think any more questions, please? So that
the hospital requires, healthcare requires heavier infrastructure in place. Like that was pointed out, be it E-Road, and during COVID, I remember that E-Road, Dindigul and all, they had so many people with lesser number of hospitals. Maybe Tamil Nadu is good, but again, Tamil Nadu in its rural, we don't know how good it is. So, infrastructure in terms of hospitals, in those kind of areas, I think only government can, to some extent, provide, because I don't know how much even a private public.
So look at Kodaikanal or Ooty or Kotagiri or something. Very difficult to get a private hospital to open. Number one, they won't have the number of patients to make it sustainable. Certain things
Doctor, I am reminded of a client of mine, a doctor from Tamil Nadu hospital, who had most of his kidney patients coming from West Bengal. So in the hospital, the first thing he did was pack his bag and put up a hospital in Kolkata. And roaring business there. And he did that, and absolutely.
Across countries, okay, they come to India because of the pricing, I guess. But even otherwise, within India, why are people moving from one place to the other? Simply because the facilities are not available. That is the address.
Araman, yes?
Basically, just to react to what Ramesh said, the corporate objective and the social objective can never be equated, because the corporate objective is to create wealth for its stakeholders. Whereas, if you pursue a social objective, then you can never create wealth. So it's where you align and what you are there for. So I mean, it's not to say that wealth creation is wrong, because wealth creation is also important, because there's so many economic benefits because of creation of wealth. Only if you create wealth, you create employment, you have purchasing power, because of that consumerism comes in. So many things are there. So it's very difficult to say that a corporate must have a social objective to it, and unless these two are aligned, certain things can't happen. I mean, that's begging the question, because these two can never be aligned to each other. No, Geo, I mean, no. Nice, correct.
So these three things come into play, is a specialist. That's not a commodity. The problem with healthcare is we are looking to give a solution of a commodity to a specialist who doesn't have.
Even in the product below, even in the product what Geo is doing, I'm not too sure whether it's driven by a socialistic objective. See, if there is
He saw the market.
And he saw the market. He saw the market. He saw the market. There was a market for entry at a particular level.
Every month the cost was falling. Every month the cost was falling.
So
Design cost was
Actually, what I'm not saying is really like for example, just step away from healthcare. You don't take environment. You should global economics. Now, global economics, for example, environment or economics or not. You see, people are arguing about these things. I mean, good environment can make good economics, provided you are creative. I'm saying you can align, you can make an effort to align social objectives with corporate effort. I'm not.
So a related question to what you've been talking about. The government has been opening a lot of innovation labs and things like that. However, it's failing to inspire industrialists, large houses, to actually come up with breakthrough in innovation. Reliance Jio is an exception. However, if you see, no Indian company, and somebody pointed out that ChatGPT should have been created in India, but somebody else created it. So we have the people. Indians are supposed to be good at it. What is it that the government could have done to actually promote Indian companies to really become world class? There are absolutely no world class Indian companies today. We are nothing. We are no world class apart from Reliance Jio in any other space. I know that lots of people will challenge that, but that's the truth. We don't have in any other space. So what is it that the government could do to make us world class?
So Krishnan, the nice point that you made, actually this time what the government has done is, so nowadays most of the research depends on data, right? So this data from ICMR and so on, the government has allowed a lot of pharma companies to utilize that data and then come out with newer innovative products. So Make in India along with innovation, R&D, that's what they're pushing this time in the budget. Let's see, hopefully it probably, it's a step in the right direction.
You have cracked the nose of the promotion, you are importing it. They are giving a fraction of the cost. An Indian radar costs 1/10 of cost on American radar, all the issues. When it is a crucial business, the materials are available now. India was a closed market, we will work on from the US, so we are not getting the raw materials to make those. Now, advanced materials, India has signed a lot of treaties. Only those, this problem is not. The materials are out.
And there is no denying the fact that the priorities are different. The government was looking at its vote bank with the majority of the people below the poverty line. You are addressing Rotary, Kapra and Makan still. You are talking about the higher priorities of the the upper middle class. That is that.
You were never seen as a rally 20 years back. You were seen pro Russia. They didn't know where we were standing. Now we are very clear.
Space was an area where the initiative was laid out much earlier, and we have made headway there. Similarly, when we take up defense or other things, that I think it will come out. The priorities are different. I think it will come at some point in time, but it's nothing to do with people, as you said. Only then prioritizing things, right?
So I have a small different view and a question or an opinion that I wanted to ask. See, whether it's healthcare, whether it's in the SME sector that we spoke about, right? In one side, we're talking about 1.4 billion population. The other side, we're saying we don't have people to work for. But I think this is what the budget kind of laid out when it talked about infrastructure. Even in the case of a Jio example, Jio came into telecom industry 25 years later after the telecom infrastructure, which was already set, going wide across India. If the same Jio plan wouldn't have probably worked 25 years before, because someone had already come in, set up the telecom network, and then Jio kind of capitalized on rolling out the plan. So maybe that will also happen to the healthcare and the SME. The critical point is, I think the industries are kind of focused around single cities, which is whether it's Chennai, Delhi, Bombay, and we failed to be able to go out and capture where the unemployment actually exists, right? And if that has to happen, if the infrastructure is not growing the way it is growing, whether it's railway networks, whether it's airport, whether the connectivity doesn't improve, the SMEs are not going to be able to go to places where there's actually people, but you're going to set up factory in Guindy Estate, you're not going to be able to afford it. The people who are going to work in an SME are not going to be able to afford to live in a city like Chennai either. So the factories are in the wrong place and the people are in the wrong place. So if this has to be networked, I think if infrastructure doesn't grow in the pace that at least they're projected to grow, for example, Siemens got the largest railway order of 9,000 engines, which has never ever happened in the world before. So if those kind of infrastructure plans actually mechanize and roll out, I think then it's easier for us to be able to, solve some of the issues that we're talking about. Just an opinion I had.
Point.
Yeah, next point is, infrastructure. The spending on infra has been emphasized for a long time, and it's coming, right? It's like, but it is, how much is real, how much is painted as a budget, but it's coming. But infra investment alone, is it enough for India? Okay, that's a question which we need to look for, and the government is addressing. But I believe the FDI is another key engine of growth. Not only infra investment. So infra investment is one, FDI is another, consumption-led is the third part. I think putting money on the people's hand is what is going to increase the consumption. But today, if you look at the real GDP growth, it's probably near zero, right? Inflation adjusted from 2011 onwards is probably flat. I mean, inflation adjusted. So is it driving the growth? Is consumption driving the growth? Maybe not, right? So the population increase might drive it slowly. But the key driver is the FDI. So I was watching the CNBC talk about this Adani episode, and in that they mentioned what India is able to attract from China is only one FDI, which is Apple. The Apple's investment from China back in India. Beyond that, they could not get any more FDI in manufacturing, which is probably the case for other sectors as well. So unless we get that FDI, which the budget should have addressed, either with PLIs or SLIs, service linked initiatives or incentives, we can't make the difference in growth to become a $10 trillion, $25 trillion country. So the budget missed that piece on a long-term basis.
To answer the question,
So you took out of the budget. Let us look at the legal business. The format for China is that if you want to match the company, it takes 3 days. In India, it still takes 8 days. Exactly. You're spot on, right? That is what the budget should address, or the government should address, to make it easier, or whatever they should do something about that to get that in the right trajectory. One trajectory is correct. Infra investment is a great trajectory. But the other two trajectories or pillars they are missing is consumption as well as FDI. That's yeah, you're right. They're just putting on 9,000 crore and ECLGS guaranteed scheme is not going to make a difference.
Thank you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. I think we have come to almost exceed by half an hour our usual time. So thank you for your patience. I should say, so many of us are here, even if it's 8:30, and I mean, the budget was an excuse to have this panel here and have that. I mean, we didn't discuss the budget here, but basically giving the perspective of our industry leaders. So thank you very much for your patience. Over to the Secretary and President. Thank you, gentlemen, panelists here.
Doctor, you are complaining that passing effect, all that, but really you have passed on your comments very well. Thank you so much. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present a small memento to all the panelists.